Welcome once again to Contemporary American Society, Causes and Consequences of Persecution in the United States. Today, we're going to discuss the history of persecution based on gender, as well as gender-based persecution in the workplace. This is the second half of the lecture on gender-based persecution. Gender-based persecution has always been a never-ending battle in the United States, from the colonial times to the present. One example in American history were the Salem witch trials. Between 1692 and 1693, in the colony of Massachusetts, more than 200 people were accused by the Puritans of being witches. That is, of having magic powers, the devil's magic, that could hurt others. Many were put in jail, 29 were found guilty, and 18 women and 1 man were killed by hanging. Let's watch a very short video about the Salem witch trials.
Witch Trials, 1692 to 1693. In Salem Village, Massachusetts, February 1692, Betty Parris, age 9, and Abigail Williams, age 11, the daughter and niece of Reverend Samuel Parris, became ill. Their health failed to improve and they went into constant fits, so a doctor called William Griggs was called in. His diagnosis? Bewitchment. Soon other young women began to exhibit similar behavior, and a wave of hysteria spread throughout colonial Massachusetts. So, a special court assembled in Salem to hear the cases and find people guilty of witchcraft. Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba were the first people to be accused and arrested of bewitching Betty Parris and Abigail Williams. Every week, more and more were accused and arrested. A belief and fear of the supernatural, and the idea that some humans, witches, were given power to harm others through it, a recent smallpox epidemic, and the threat of attack by Native American tribes all fueled the hysteria in the Salem community. The first convicted witch, Bridget Bishop, was described as wearing black clothing and odd costumes, which was against the strict Puritan code of Salem. She was hanged on June 10, 1692, at Gallows Hill. 18 more people were executed by hanging after being convicted of being a witch. Several others died in prison, and one man was even crushed to death by heavy stones as a form of torture. Contrary to popular belief, none of the condemned were burned at the stake. 150 more people would be accused of witchcraft, but by September 1692, the hysteria had died down and people started to turn against the trials, with the last one ending in early 1693. Subscribe to see more history videos.
Over the last few centuries, women have fought for their civil rights to be protected by law. Civil rights are the basic rights that all citizens of a society should have, regardless of their race or their gender. Not all individuals in the US have always had their basic civil rights protected. That is, women who didn't always have the right to vote or equal treatment under the law. In 1848, the Declaration of Sentiments was written at the first Women's Rights Convention. It set out the issues and goals of the women's civil rights movement. The declaration called for equal rights for women, including voting rights. 20 years later, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton created the National Women's Suffrage Association. Suffrage refers to the right to vote. The main goal of this group was to gain passage of an amendment to the US Constitution that would give voting rights to women. But it wasn't until 1920, 100 years later, after the women's rights movement started, that the 19th Amendment to the US Constitution was passed, guaranteeing women the right to vote. It wasn't until 1963 that the Equal Pay Act was passed by Congress and made it illegal to pay women less than men for the same job based on their gender. Shortly after, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, also known as the EEOC, was created to investigate complaints and punish companies for gender and race discrimination. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission ruled that ads in newspapers for jobs couldn't indicate the sex of the person that the company was looking for. This let women apply for higher paying jobs. Just the other day, a legal case was brought by the EEOC against a video game company in California involving harassment and discrimination. It was settled with the company agreeing to pay $18 million. Throughout American history, the idea of equal opportunity has played a major role in American society. Different factors, like equality in sports, have had positive changes over time. But then there are other factors like gender discrimination in the workforce and healthcare that still haven't changed for the better. On the basis of gender, the US has not fully had equal opportunity. That is fairness, that individuals are treated similarly, without prejudices and without preferences. American women still face gender discrimination all throughout society. Besides for gender discrimination in the workplace, which we'll discuss shortly, gender discrimination affects women's access to reliable and affordable health care. Women are often denied health insurance and receive unfair and limited access to medical facilities. Oftentimes, health insurance companies charge women more than men. Before Title IX, the amendment to the US Constitution that doesn't allow discrimination based on gender, female athletes' involvement and success in sports was not as meaningful as men's. Another issue is the pay gap, the fact that women and men get unequal pay for equal work. Despite the equal pay law, women in the workforce still earn significantly less than men. Women from all educational levels not getting paid the same as men in general. This shows that education is not an effective solution for the gender pay gap. When men and women attend the same kind of college, choose the same major, and have the same kind of job, on average, women earn less. For every dollar that a man earns, women earn about 80 cents for the same work. Let's watch a video about the history of persecution based on gender and the gender pay gap.
Is it queens of the court?
And Serena Williams is still the queen of the center court.
How about queens of pop, working on our craft non-stop until we reach the top?
Or perhaps it's the way we use our words, not deterred to let our voice be heard.
Now that's lyrical poetry, ladies.
Would history makers be a proper definition?
I, Kamala Davy Harris, solemnly swear.
As women, we are all of these things and more. But when it comes to our male counterparts, we're not always paid the same. So why the consistent shortfall? We're talking about it today on Justice for All.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Tammy Fields. All this month, we are recognizing the contributions of women as part of Women's History Month. This timeline right here, it shows just some of the major accomplishments after a decade-long fight for the right to vote. The 19th Amendment, it was finally ratified in 1920, declaring that women, like men, deserve all the rights and responsibilities of citizenship, including the right to vote. 28 years later, another battle was won when President Truman signed an executive order calling for the desegregation of the U.S. Armed Forces, officially allowing women to serve in all branches of the military. And then in 1963, a major move regarding finances. President John F. Kennedy signed the Equal Pay Act into law, prohibiting gender-based wage discrimination here in the United States. Now, all of these sound good on paper, but fast forward to today. Women still find themselves having to fight for equality. Let's take a look at the Equal Pay Act specifically. It mandated equal pay for equal work by forbidding employers from paying men and women different wages or benefits for doing jobs that require the same skills and responsibilities. Here we are in 2022, and research shows women make about 83 cents for every dollar a man earns. So what gives? Our panel today will try to help us answer that question and talk about possible solutions. From the University of Central Florida, we have Dr. Michelle Dussault. Also joining us, Debbie DeLand, the president of Florida Now. Ladies, thank you so much, both of you, for being here with us to tackle this very tough topic. We appreciate it. We have a lot to cover. Thank you. I want to start with Debbie. Debbie, this question is for you. Your organization's purpose is really to eliminate discrimination and protect equal rights for women. So what do you see as the leading contributing factors to the gender pay gap?
There are two in my mind. One is the segregation of occupations, where you're segregated and the men's jobs get paid more than the women's jobs for the same skills. It may not be in the same business, but that needs to be we need a systemic change for that. It's when teachers get paid less than, for example, sanitation workers or whatever, where the skill set is very different. The second thing, and that's about 50% of what's causing the gap. The other thing is just sheer discrimination. It's about 40% of the gap is based on discrimination. Women, especially mothers get paid 30% less than fathers. And in that case, they aren't viewed, the research shows they aren't viewed as competent or committed to the job.
Dr. Dussault, let's have you jump in here right now. I know as an associate lecturer, this is something that you've taught a lot of classes about, including gender communication. Give us some real specific information now about the research that you've done as to where we are when it comes to the gender pay gap.
Well, you already talked about the fact that women make 83 cents on the dollar to men, but that's not even including the intersectional issues that have to do with race and different identifications. If you were to look at that same number of the highest earning population, which is non-Hispanic white men, compared to Hispanic, Latino, and Black women, that number is closer to between 57 and 63 cents to the dollar.
About 42% of working women say that they've experienced gender discrimination. Women are treated as if they weren't able to do certain work. Also, women are more likely to receive less support from senior managers than men are. Many believe that women aren't as dedicated to the job and should focus more on taking care of their family and their home. Another way that women are discriminated against in the workplace is that they often aren't allowed to advance to get a better, more important job. This is known as the glass ceiling, which refers to an invisible barrier, an invisible obstacle that prevents women from rising above a certain level. And it's often because of men's prejudices against women. This kind of inequality goes back for centuries and comes from the idea that that men provide for women. While men usually support a family, women take care of the home and the children. So many people believe that men are better in their career because it's the only responsibility that they have. This is known as systemic discrimination. It's part of the behavior, policies, or practices that are part of an organization and that create or make the situation keep happening. This idea of the value of work, the result of bias against women and in favor of men, like the idea of men strong and women weak, men logical, while women are emotional, men are leaders and women are followers. Let's watch a short video about gender discrimination in the workplace. The EEOC, you may remember, refers to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Title VII makes it unlawful for an employer to discriminate on the basis of gender in any employment situation or opportunity. We now review some of the ways in which employers have engaged in gender-based discrimination. These include gender as the basis of an employment decision, gender plus discrimination, and sexual harassment. First, employers engage in gender discrimination when they use a person's gender as the basis for an employment decision. This form is the most straightforward and obvious way that gender discrimination occurs. The second form of gender discrimination occurs when an employee would have been treated differently if it had not been for that employee's gender. This form is known as gender plus discrimination. An employer who refuses to hire women with preschool-aged children but hires males with preschool-aged children is guilty of gender plus discrimination. The third form of gender discrimination is sexual harassment. Under Title VII, any form of gender discrimination is illegal, but in 1986, the Supreme Court ruled on a gender discrimination case. This case made it clear that creating a hostile work environment for someone because of their gender was also prohibited under Title VII and was considered sexual harassment. Keep in mind that sexual harassment can involve two members of the same gender. According to EEOC guidelines, sexual harassment includes, but is not limited to, the following: unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature when submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly as a term or condition of an individual's employment. Submission to or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as the basis for employment decisions affecting such individual, or such conduct has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with the individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or otherwise offensive working environment. The EEOC has identified two types of sexual harassment. The most straightforward type is called quid pro quo harassment. Quid pro quo means something for something, or this for that. When this type of harassment occurs, submission to sexual conduct is made explicitly or implicitly as a condition of employment. A manager might agree to give an employee a raise or a promotion in exchange for her going out on a date with him. No date, no raise. The manager's request constitutes quid pro quo sexual harassment. The other form of sexual harassment is referred to as hostile work environment sexual harassment. Hostile work environment harassment is quite controversial in some instances and more straightforward in others. The challenge arises because what may not appear to be a hostile work environment to one person may appear to be to another. Some people are offended by jokes with sexual overtones, while others are not. Whether or not employees might be offended, the jokes do not belong in the workplace. Managers have an obligation to take corrective action once they are informed of a potential sexual harassment situation. According to the EEOC, a company may be guilty of harassment if the company knew or should have known about the harassment. A manager who ignores a complaint is allowing the climate to exist that's offensive to an employee in the work unit. If the employee pursues action through the EEOC or through the courts, the question becomes whether there is a pattern of such behavior in the firm's workplace and whether a reasonable person would find the behaviors offensive. In sexual harassment cases in which the victim of harassment complains to management and nothing is done, or management should have known about the problem even if the victim did not speak up, the victim will have a better chance of winning the case. Therefore, it is important for managers to act quickly and decisively when any suggestion of sexual harassment occurs. Managers are agents of the company and put the company at risk if they are the harassers, or if they fail to take complaints seriously, or their employees tell them about possible sexual harassment incidents. The EEOC and the courts generally respond more favorably to employers who have clearly communicated to employees that behavior of a sexual nature is not welcome in the workplace. Also, employers can improve their chances of defending a case brought against them by showing that the plaintiff did not take advantage of corrective and preventative opportunities offered by the employer. If the company can prove that the incident was never reported, even though the company had a clearly defined complaint process, the company will have a better chance of defending its lack of responsiveness. The EEOC has clearly articulated basic guidelines for employers to follow to reduce the incidence of sexual harassment in the workplace.
This week, we'll also discuss persecution on the basis of political opinion. So that I expect you to look at and listen to in a few days, not all at once. Okay, have a wonderful rest of your day. Welcome back to Contemporary American Society, Causes and Consequences of Persecution in the United States. Today, we're going to discuss persecution based on political opinion in the 20th and 21st centuries. Political persecution happens when the government controls citizens by force and takes away their civil liberties for political reasons in order to achieve political goals. It often happens because of fears about national security. Civil liberties are guarantees and freedoms given to the people by governments. Let's watch a video about a debate, that is a discussion between two people who have different beliefs. Here we see a political debate between a naval officer with top secret clearance working in the Department of Homeland Security, who's also a Muslim, and a person from the National Security Institute who believes the government should be able to surveil all Americans. Surveillance refers to watching a person closely.